We'll give it one more minute. Please help yourself to refreshments.
It's very nice of you to have refreshments.
And Pat tries.
You need to advertise if you're going to do that. Right. Yeah,
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. We are going to try to start on time because we have some tight schedules to work with. There's some things happening in New York City, as you know. Some people need to get on trains, planes, probably not all meals. Thank you very much for joining for this official relaunch of the Congressional Caucus for Effective Foreign Assistance. I am Todd Preston, the Executive Director of the Modernizing Foreign Assistance Network, MFAN. MFAN is really delighted and excited that the Aid Effectiveness Caucus is relaunching under the leadership of Congressman Adam Smith, Democrat from Washington, a previous co-chair of the caucus, and Congresswoman Young Kim, Republican from California, who's a new co-chair, and you'll be hearing from both of them later in the program. They do have votes, but they should be here by about 2:40. Which is why we are going to start with the panel first. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces here in the room, some new faces, not only from the Hill, but also from civil society, from USAID and MCC and the DFC, and we also have a good turnout online, so thanks to you who are joining virtually. I'm just going to make some brief remarks, then we'll turn it over to the panel. Everyone in this room knows that the demands on global development programs are very, very high. The result of a number of factors, including aggression by Russia and China, the after effects of the COVID epidemic, climate change, other humanitarian disasters. And so the need for U.S. leadership is critical in helping address these challenges and these needs. And also building on the tremendous progress that has been made in the last 2 decades in global health and development to make it even more effective, more impactful, and more efficient. There's a lot of good news to talk about. I'm sure we're going to hear about that this afternoon from our panelists. But the situation that we are in today is it just underscores the importance of making sure that we have a very well-resourced, modern, and innovative development toolkit. Ensuring that development programs are evidence-based, data-driven, transparent, and locally led is essential for boosting their impact and their return on investment for U.S. taxpayers. So that, in a nutshell, is the mission of MFAN. We're a bipartisan coalition that was formed in 2008 to build on the progress that had been made, beginning with the creation of PEPFAR in 2003, the creation of the MCC in 2004 during the George W. Bush administration. And that was essentially the mission of the creation of this caucus back in 2011. To quote from the mission, it's to provide a bipartisan educational forum to examine how the United States delivers foreign assistance and aid, to explore success stories found in the efficient delivery of foreign assistance, and further improve overall effectiveness of development aid. The caucus has been a really important platform in previous years in advancing a bipartisan consensus around aid effectiveness issues on Capitol Hill and off the Hill. Several pieces of legislation that were adopted were very much thanks to the work of the members and the staff of the caucus. Just a couple of examples are the Foreign Aid Transparency and Accountability Act of 2016 and the BUILD Act of 2018, which created the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. So that's why we're so excited. This caucus is being relaunched under the leadership of two fantastic members of Congress, Congressman Smith and Congresswoman Kim. So we're first going to hear from our two distinguished speakers, both former USAID administrators, one during the Obama administration and one during the Trump administration. Tessie will give you maybe a bit of a brief bio introduction. And before I turn it over to Tessie, let me just briefly introduce her. Dr. Tessie San Martin is the CEO of FHI 360, also a co-chair of MFAN. She has over 30 years of experience working as an executive in the public and private sectors, bilateral and multilateral development agencies and academia, focusing especially on economic growth, political reform, and gender equality. Prior to joining FHI 360, she was CEO of Plan International USA, served as Group Vice President at Apt Associates, and as Director of the Operations Group of the World Bank's Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. She is a passionate and very effective advocate for these issues, and MFAN has been very fortunate to have her as our co-chair. So, Tessie, please, over to you.
Wow, okay, so.
Yeah, now it's on. Great. So thanks for that introduction, which is embarrassing now because my introduction is going to be longer than the introduction I had for the two people that are way more accomplished than I am. And all I would say as an introduction was that I can't think of two better people to be part of this relaunch of the Congressional Caucus for Aid Effectiveness than Ambassador Green and Gail Smith, because the two of them are not just former administrators, but their brilliant careers have given them seriously. Because, you know, when you look at your careers, you have seen, you have engaged with, you have shaped.
The job is what you're saying.
Well, I did not say that. But you have seen and engaged with and shaped foreign assistance from a number of different perspectives. And I think not just your experience at USAID, but that, you know, sort of well-rounded view of how foreign assistance is shaped and shapes lives is what makes, I think, your viewpoints so interesting. And of course, the former administrators today, Gail is the CEO of the One Campaign, Mark is the CEO of the Wilson Center, and yes, yet another job. I'm not going to comment on that. But let me start because Todd had a very articulate beginning to everything about foreign assistance. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that's not what everybody thinks, right? When people, so I'm going to be a little bit provocative, right? Because there are a lot of people that think that foreign assistance is not a good use of money. That at the end of the day, all it does is it feeds corruption, that's not the best use of our money, that maybe we should be investing in more trade and less aid, that, yeah, it's nice to feel good about charity, but that, we've got many other, things to do. And so I guess let me just start this panel by asking the two of you, why should, for skeptical voters, for perhaps skeptical members, why does foreign assistance matter? Why should it be supported? How has it made a difference?
So I'll tell you the story of how I came into this, and actually George Ingram's part to blame. End of my first, so I started years ago. I was a teacher in Kenya. My wife and I taught in a village school. Left that behind, figured I was done. No more foreign work. Get into politics. I had taken a trip with George and Save the Children, and we had gone to Mali and Ghana. Again, thought I'd put that aside. Right after 9/11, Denny Hastert, Speaker Hastert, came up to me on the floor of the House, and he said, look, I got lots of people around here who can catch and kill bad guys. I need people to stop there from being more bad guys. And he said, I saw that you were a teacher. I want you to go on, we called it the International Relations Committee in those days. I want you to go on the committee and to start to work on this. And that was it. I was in. And it was in the wake of 9/11. And that began, I think, for both sides of the aisle, a remarkable chain of events in the evolution and shaping of the tools of foreign assistance. And I'll wind it up by saying when I was named administrator for USAID, I had some people coming to me scared that I was going to, take apart, feed the future, whatever it might be, and say, well, why would I do that? It actually works. That this is a space in which both sides of the aisle is a continuum. We craft these tools, every administration adds, reshapes, which is good. We always have to update. But this is actually a remarkable legacy of success. Not everything's great. We have things to work on, but it's not bad. It's a pretty good progression. And that to me is, for all of us who are here in this building today, that's why to get involved, because this is a legacy of success. It's an area in which we can reshape lives. We can build a better, safer world, more prosperous world, and something you should all be proud of.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah.
I would very much agree with that. And one of the things I like about this event, Mark and I worked together for a longer time than one could actually calculate, because neither of us is old enough to have been working
I think we were 7 and 8 or
For
something
that.
like that at the time.
for that long. But it is one of the few spaces where there's not only bipartisan support, it's nonpartisan. It's everybody's focused on the same thing. And there's a lot of mutual respect, right? And so, I mean, that's important. Look, here's why I think it's important. That bipartisanship, people around the world see that. People around the world know that PEPFAR is something that president after, well, Republican and Democrats in the Congress to president have passed the mantle. We could rename that the president's, plural, emergency program on AIDS relief. That matters. That sends a message that for the United States, there's some things more important than politics. Number two, it matters not just in the sense, I think it's often seen by people that, well, President so-and-so knows that we're giving foreign aid, but nobody else does. People actually know it. People know who made it possible for their kids to go to school, who made it possible for nutrition to improve, who made it possible for that maternity clinic to open. And we gathering that and conveying that, we don't tell that story very well, but it's really, really important. And I'll tell you why. In recent polling of young people across Africa, in terms of who cared the most about the future of the continent, who was doing the most to invest in the future of the continent, guess who outranked the United States? China. And it wasn't because these young people are saying, we love these really big projects where they bring in their own labor and it's not very good. It's because that's what they're seeing. They're seeing a tangible change in their lives because of what China is doing. And quite frankly, they're seeing a less visible sign of what we're doing. Because we're not, I think we're all a little nervous. We're not championing it right now. For the security reasons that Mark's story, I think, elucidates very well. I think there are two other reasons I would mention. One is our economic interests. And again, it's not a story we tell terribly well. But again, think about Africa. It's the largest untapped market in the world. If we can use foreign assistance to build capacity, that kind of capacity that changes risk perception, right? Fosters stability. American companies invest. That's a very good thing for America. And with all the talk about supply chains, with all that is needed for future industries, whether it's on green energy or anything else, the developing world's pretty vital to the United States, and having market relationships is pretty vital. But I'll end where my point of entry is, and I think it's much the same as Mark's and probably the same as many people here, and I think it's certainly, having been at Y River when we sort of came up with the idea of MFA, and I think drove that. The expression of our values matters. It's not popular right now. Compassion is really not popular. So I'm not suggesting this be the selling point, but I think when you get past the politics and you're talking to people, as we do, out in the United States in various parts of the country, they get that. And at a time when the world is as divided as it is, I think projecting those values and saying that we actually have solidarity with other people brings us a return that's immeasurable.
I'll just add to that. So I'm a conservative Republican.
It's okay.
It's more than okay.
And you're my friend.
And I mean, the way that I look at our outreach to Africa, for example, it's a pretty simple model. We want every country in the world to go from being aid recipients to partners to fellow donors in a perfect world. That's the model. It's the deal that we offer. It's good for us, good for Africa. You can't get very far if you aren't providing the kinds of assistance that incentivize the reforms that make private investment possible, but also provide opportunity. The median age of an African is under 19. It's extraordinary. This is a young continent, and they want exactly what we want, what our kids want, what our families want, what small businesses want. They can't get there without the kinds of innovative assistance, reform-oriented assistance that I think is the hallmark of success over multiple administrations. So that's the model. And, you know, as a conservative, that's great. That's what we want. We're looking for partners. We're looking for ways to grow prosperity.
Thank you both. Let me sort of build on that. You've both referred to sort of a legacy of successes, you know, that we've had. Todd talked about that a little bit. And if you think about, so this caucus was established in 2011. You know, before then we had PEPFAR and we had the MCC. After that, we had the Foreign Aid Transparency and Accountability and the BUILD Act. So those are really important milestones in terms of advancing and modernizing foreign assistance. What other, do you see, you know, each of you, and other milestones or important advancements, you know, that we have seen in our lifetime that is worth calling out?
Unlimited, right? I mean, the technology has made things possible that couldn't have dreamed of. So, I tell people, when I started in Kenya all those years ago, there was one wind-up telephone in the village mounted on a box, and you literally went down and said, operator, give me Nairobi 662, put it down, sit under the mango tree, and a half an hour later the call would go through. 10 years later, I go there as an election observer, thanks to Henry Hyde. Couldn't tell anybody in the village I was coming for security. I see a young guy, and I said, do you know Neva, one of my former students? He said, yes. And I said, can you go and get him? And he sent him a text message, and Neva came to meet me. And it's just like, oh my God, the world has changed. And, you know, it goes on in some of the stuff that Gail's helped to craft overseas. We're doing things with frugal technology that are extraordinary. Every single day, farmers in West Africa get a personalized text message that gives them a 48-hour weather forecast and tells them when they can plant. And I mean, that's amazing. Not so far from that wind-up telephone on a box. So even beyond, I think the policy makes it possible, but there are things happening each and every day that I just could never have dreamed of, and it's fantastic.
Thanks, Mark. Gail?
No, I'd agree with that. And I think whether it's things like Feed the Future, again, the strong bipartisan support for turning that into law. And Mark built on it, which is, again, as you said, what we should do. We've got stories and stats to go with it. We're with them about the impact of U.S. foreign assistance on agriculture, on nutrition, on job creation, on getting girls and boys into school and well educated. In almost every sector, we've got stories that we can tell. So I think there's ample evidence that the return on this is good when it comes to effectiveness. There's no question. We need to tell the story more and with more data and more often, and we need more people to make the kinds of trips and do the kinds of things that Mark has done, because it's been my experience that anytime people see it in front of their eyes, the transformation that aid can foster becomes clear in ways that all the data and the best storytelling in the world isn't gonna convey.
So building on that, so those are successes and good things that have been accomplished, but clearly they're challenges or obstacles that
Yes.
remain, right? So for all that we have accomplished, we could do so much more. What are some of those challenges or obstacles that you believe the administrator, along with Congress, can and should be working on to address?
Do you mind if I take that first? Because because I really love traffic, so I'm going to nip out of here a couple minutes early, with all due respect to all of you and the members, to catch a train to go to New York. For good reason, but anyway. I would say a couple things. And look, one of the really lovely things about being USAID administrator is there's a solidarity between and amongst them that is extraordinary. So I'm less inclined to say, well, Administrator Power should do X, Y, or Z. I do think there are some things that broadly in the space of foreign aid we can do to make it more effective. One of it wasn't always received well when I advocated it when I was in the White House for President Obama, but that is greater collaboration and leverage between and among our aid agencies. When we did the first PPD on global development, I had 18 departments, offices, or federal entities in the room, all of whom had something that they contributed to this broad thing called foreign assistance. USDA's got a bit, Treasury's got a bit. It's not just USAID, MCC, and DFC. We don't do enough to leverage between and amongst each other. I suspect my friend Mark will have something to say about DFC. The Build Act was spectacular. There's a huge opportunity there to leverage, now that it can do debt and equity, what DFC can do, marry that to what aid can do. MCC can now do regional projects. There are really big, visible, game changer things that we can do if we undertake more internal collaboration and leverage. And remind everybody, and I say this, I mean, I was fine to be reminded when I was USAID administrator. At the end of the day, nobody's going to care which agency did it, right? It's going to be that the United States did something. So I think that's one big area. I think the second is make more of evaluation of the data we have on what works and what doesn't, and some of the things that can answer some of the critiques that immediately come up. There's massive corruption, this doesn't work, the money is wasted. I think there's a culture that's emerged, and I think MCC is still probably state of the art on evaluation. But one of the things that Raj Shah and I spent a lot of time on was revamping how we do evaluation, publishing evaluations, and getting into the habit of coming up here from time to time and saying, you know that great program? Well, some of our assumptions were wrong. It didn't work as well as we thought. We've got the data, so we're going to revise it. That earned us the confidence of staff and members much more than coming up here and saying every program is perfect. But I think we can do more on that and making that available. We've got the data. I think we can tell stories about what works and what doesn't and have partnerships in doing that. So I think preempting the kinds of concerns we know that are out there, showing you get these concerns about corruption, or I remember a lot of anger from one part of the Congress that we were giving any aid to Zimbabwe at a certain point. Not a penny of that went to the government. That all went to civil society organizations that were trying to prevent Zimbabwe from going over the edge. How do we get those things out there? I think is one of the key things we need to do. Get the answers out there to the questions we know people are asking.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. Well, and calling out, and you've said it also, Mark, being willing to talk about failures, not just successes. Otherwise,
But it's also,
we're not learning.
one thing I would say that always surprised me from my days at aid, staff would be so reluctant to go to the Hill. And the same thing is true in the State Department. Always a mistake. Go to the Hill.
Yeah.
And, I think that, yeah, I mean, but part of it is is being straightforward with members. So when you have a challenge, if there's a problem that appears, so you go to members and you say, yeah, no, it was a mistake. We did our best. This is what we tried to do. And push back and say, yeah, this is hard. We're working in a really bad, difficult place. Yeah, this is hard. We can do aid in Denmark and everything will go smoothly. Or we can work in Haiti where, yeah, it's really, really hard. We should push back. Secondly, and I suspect Gail knew it, touched upon a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I hate how we do branding. Absolutely hate it. We have so many logos and acronyms. I spoke at World AIDS Day at a stadium in Tanzania. I led the diplomatic community. And I got out there and I looked around the stadium, and all the way around the outside were all the different logos of the parts of PEPFAR. I helped to create PEPFAR. I didn't know what they meant. And for Tanzanians for whom English is their third language, they really don't know what it meant. Instead of just saying from the American people, nobody cares what your acronym is. So it is a pet peeve of mine. Mike McCall actually helped to improve it with legislation he brought forward. We have more to do. We have a lot more to do than we do. Critiques. What I don't think we do very well is define success. Where are we going? What's the end game? What does success look like? I think sometimes we get caught up in inputs. Where do we want to go? In my time at AID, I tried to create roadmaps that help us chart where we should go and prioritize investments. We want to, quite literally, and some of you heard me say this in my opening speech. I said, look, the purpose of foreign assistance is ending its need to exist. And every single day, the investments we make should take us a day or two closer. If it doesn't, stop doing it and do something different or do something better. So I think we don't do that as well as we need to. The other piece that I really think we have to think through, and we really need all of you to help with this. So I'm an original co-author of PEPFAR. I'm an original co-author of the MCC. That's the work that I got involved in after 9/11. We have to remember they were created in an entirely different era. We are in the era of what many call great power competition. Some of the countries that the administration is targeting for, yes, strategic reasons, our tools don't even apply. Shame on us. That's just silly. So we should be willing to shape the tools for our foreign policy needs. It's one of our most effective outreach on foreign policy, and yet I worry that we're missing. And also fund things that work. I mentioned to someone earlier, I'm a big fan of MCC, on the board in the Obama administration. I was on the board, and then with USAID, and I was talking to someone you all know, a good friend of mine in Congress right now, and he was talking about how they're going to change the income criteria to make it easier. And I said, look, you can only do a compact and a half per year with the low level of funding. You can get rid of the income criteria. You're not going to move the needle. Fund it. Fund it seriously. Put it to work. It's great. And that's true of a lot of our programs. We get caught up around the details and not realize that we're in a different world than we were. And so I think that's important. And the final thing that we need your help on, we have 110 million displaced people in the world right now. We have 2 million children were born in camps in the last 2 years. 2 million. And they're growing up in camps. And statistically, on average, they're going to be there for 17, 18 years. We had better figure out how we work in those settings. Humanitarian assistance, and the U.S. is the largest donor in the world. USAID is the largest donor of the largest donor in the world. Humanitarian assistance is treatment, not cure. We have to make investments to help those poor, vulnerable people trapped in the worst places on the face of the earth be empowered so that, God willing, that fence comes down, the gate opens up, pick your image. They are not vulnerable to exploitative forces, and they're ready to do what they want to do, which is contribute. So that's not a criticism. It's an observation of how rapidly things are changing. And so I think we've got to figure out how we do a better job in some of those development investments, classic resilience on the margins. Because if we don't, I think we're going to get to a place where, again, God willing, many of these poor people will cease to be displaced or able to put in roots, if you will, and we're going to be dismayed at the vulnerability that's arisen and the exploitation that occurs, and we're going to wonder what happened. Now's the time to make these investments. So they will require some reforms. I think we've got good tools. We need to make sure that they are applicable to what we're seeing today. If not, I think we're falling short.
Thanks, Mark. And I think it's a great observation. The world into which PEPFAR, MCC, many of the organizations, like the one I represent, they were meant to, deliver development assistance in low resource settings, but we're dealing with fragility, we're dealing with displacement, we're dealing with conflict that seems to be unending. And so we need to rethink how we.
Again, it's not throwing these things out, it's sharpening them, right? It's just make them applicable and also align them better than we do. But these are good problems. That means that we know some things that work. We just need to sort of step back and take a bigger picture view and make sure the framework is applicable.
Thank you. Well, with that, but so we've heard a lot about the legacy of success, the challenges, and what remains to be done. And with the time that remains, I wanted to open it up for questions. Well, really of Mark, because don't ask me any questions. So please. Yes, please.
Quick observation and a question. The observation, Master Green, is they're still reluctant to go to the Hill, which is very bad. Mm-hmm. It continues to be especially bad. I hear comments when I visit Hill offices all the time about how they never hear from USAID. After doing this for years, it still astounds me. So that hasn't changed. Second thing is, would you agree or dispute completely the statement that there is a culture of secrecy at USAID?
Boy, so what I would say, so in my time at AID, we undertook what I hope were, so I get to USAID. My observation was that it had grown organically, which meant that it was often illogical the way that it grew. We had programs, different parts of the agency, and we really needed to do a sort of a reform, which AID does every 20 to 25 years anyway. So my goal was to create a framework to better align and extend and expand the programs. So that's the approach that we were undertaking. And to my great gratitude, I won't say surprise, great gratitude, the team at USAID were great. They undertook the reforms. They took it seriously. I'm the political who comes in, and I sort of said, this is my vision, and they're very constructive. There were some things that I wanted to do, which they said didn't make sense. They were usually right on that, but I found it to be, I didn't have any problems. I mean, I never had problems of people not, I won't say loyal, but pitching in to try to make things better. And I went up to the Hill all the time. I would go and meet both sides of the aisle. And part of what I wanted to do when I went there, I'd have members who didn't like something that we were doing. And we'd sort of say, okay, this is why, this is what we see. And again, it goes back to where you began. Go to the Hill. We're all on the same side. We're trying to make these things work. Answer questions. Be forthcoming. You're not going to hide anything. If people think you're going to hide anything, that's not going to work. And secondly, as you noted, it's not a matter of preempting. It's just going up there and saying, look, this is what we faced. This is what you wanted us to do. This is how we tried to do it. Yeah, this worked. This didn't. It is unfortunate because I think they have, aid, but really the whole family of the development community, I think they have far greater support and openness in the Hill than they realize. I mean, are they going to have people that are going to oppose? Sure. That's not going to change, but I think there's all kinds of goodwill towards openness, and we need to do that all the time, more.
Great.
Thank you, Mark. We're going to
Thank you, Mark. We're just going to take a pause on the Q&A. We have Congressman Smith and Congresswoman Kim who have arrived. Very, very grateful for their leadership, as we were talking about before. So I'm going to turn it over to George Ingram, who's going to introduce Congressman Smith, and then Les Munson, who will introduce Congresswoman Kim. George, please.
Thanks, Todd. I'm going to be very brief because Congressman Smith does not need much of an introduction. He's been in Congress since 1996 from basically the Seattle area. Is ranking on the Armed Services Committee, has chaired it in the past. I think he's best introduced and explained why he's here in his own words. And how he champions a holistic approach to U.S. national security is evidenced by his words that he recognizes the importance of poverty reduction, access to education, sustainable global markets, diplomatic engagement, and good governance for fostering peaceful, stable, and international partners. Many of us know him particularly because of his leadership in the House on the BUILD Act. And most relevant to us here today, he was the original co-chair of the Caucus for Effective Assistance in 2011, along with Congressman Crenshaw and subsequently Ted Yoho. And we are very excited that you're continuing in that role and are going to be working with us on making aid more effective.
Thank you very much. This is a topic I have a great deal of passion about, so I'm pleased that we're getting the Caucus for Effective Foreign Assistance up and going again. I want to thank Congresswoman Kim for joining. Also, special shout out to Congressman Yoho, who we work very closely with on the BUILD Act. And I can honestly say this, he had more to do with that than anybody, including me. At the time we were working on, I was the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, so I was working on passing the NDAA, but Ted just went after that like an absolute bulldog and got it done. And it's really, really impressive. And it also speaks to one of the many important aspects of this, the bipartisanship of it. And I tell the story. The only thing I knew about Ted Yoho when someone said to me, hey, would you like to have him be the new co-chair, was an article I'd read in the New Yorker, which sort of outlined him as sort of the perfect Tea Party Republican. And with all this stuff, and I don't remember what was going on, but it's like, okay. But he was awesome. And it really points to something that Mark was saying just a moment ago, the broad support for the issues that we're talking about here. I mean, I think it is a huge mistake to think of this as something, well, traditionally people on the left side of the political spectrum, they care about development aid. No, it is very, very bipartisan in both the House and the Senate, a recognition of the importance that the role plays in the world, the U.S. plays in the world, and the fact that to play that role effectively, we've got to be better at helping developing nations and helping on issues that affect all countries across the globe. Doing that puts us in the best position to meet our interests, as well as also leading to that more peaceful, stable, and prosperous world that was just described. So I think we're doing some really good work. The other thing that I'm really passionate about is improving upon that work. I think we can do better. I know one of the subjects we're talking about here, and something we've been trying to go after for some time, is the way that our foreign development assistance is spread out across. Someone said that there was a chart they showed me one time of it, and it's impossible to follow. I mean, literally impossible to follow. So many different people have so many small pieces of it. If we could better consolidate that, I think we could do a better job. I remember working closely with Raj Shah when he was USAID director, and his challenges in trying to figure that out. And then also building in greater flexibility for USAID. Raj was frequently frustrated. I got a big problem over here. I need money. I've got money, but it's in this pot. and I can't move it from that pot to this pot, so therefore I can't help people. So there are many ways to improve this. Lastly is partners. U.S. is involved, but the great thing about this issue is there are a ton of people involved, a ton of countries that are involved and engaged, and also a lot of private nonprofit institutions that are out there. And if we can better coordinate all of those resources, I think we can deliver better results. And that, overall effort has had a lot of success. The poverty rate has come down significantly globally over the course of the last 30 or 40 years. We've eradicated a number of diseases, made enormous progress on others. So we can be successful. I guess I'll close with this comment, and that's one of the biggest thing I try to pitch to people about foreign assistance and foreign aid and development. You can tend to be a little negative and pessimistic about it. Think of all these stories about all the people suffering in the world and all the things that just haven't been done. Don't be. The other way of looking at it is a little bit makes an enormous difference in the lives of, tens of millions of people. So we are making a difference, and we can make even more of a difference if we continue to focus on the effort and coordinate. And the fact that so many people are here really speaks to the fact that there is that commitment. So thank you. I'm pleased to be back working on this. Appreciate you being in the panel. And I thank Congresswoman Kim for joining us. I really, really look forward to working with you. Thank you all.
Hello, I'm Lester Munson. I'm one of the co-chairs of MFAN, along with Tessie San Martin. I want to say it was terrific to have two former USAID administrators here, Gail Smith and Mark Green, who are both terrific. I just want to say in the future, Tessie San Martin will also be a terrific USAID administrator. Whoever nominates her will be doing us all a huge credit. Let me say very quickly, as someone who used to run ledge affairs at USAID in a previous administration, it's hard work. LPA, which is Legislative and Public Affairs Bureau, is up here all of the time. It is being led today by the very terrific Jody Herman, who is here. She will tell you they are very open to working with the Hill. They come up here every month and do an open house for staff. They do a terrific job. It's a lot of work. It's important work, and they're very much a partner along with MFAN and the Caucus for the good work that needs to be done. So, that's my editorial comment. I'm really here to introduce Congresswoman Young Kim. It is my honor to do so. She was elected in 2020 to represent California's 40th District, which includes parts of Orange, San Bernardino, and Riverside counties. She serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We are in their hearing room here, one of their hearing rooms, and on the Financial Services Committee. On the Foreign Affairs Committee, she serves as the chair of the subcommittee on the Indo-Pacific and is a member of the subcommittee on Africa. She has quickly become a widely respected voice among her colleagues on foreign affairs issues, and for good reason. Like her former boss, Congressman Ed Royce, who was a chair of this committee, she is a strong leader on behalf of America's global engagement and is the lead Republican author on several important bipartisan aid effectiveness bills, including the Fostering Innovation in Global Development Act and the Millennium Challenge Corporation Eligibility Expansion Act. This Congress and our community could not ask for a more skilled and knowledgeable member to serve as the co-chair of this vital caucus alongside Congressman Smith. So it is my distinct honor to welcome Congresswoman Young Kim to the podium.
I want to thank everyone for being here, and I do apologize for our panelists for this break, hopefully for a good reason. So you get to see the co-chairs that are serving on this MFAN. I want to thank the Effective Foreign Assistance Network for hosting today's event and also relaunching the Effective Foreign Assistance Caucus. I'm really proud and honored to be joining as a co-chair along with Congressman Adam Smith, who has worked on this issue for a very, very long time, and I do appreciate his leadership on these issues, and I look forward to working with all of you. As was introduced, I serve as a chairwoman of the Indo-Pacific Subcommittee on House Foreign Affairs Committee. Prior to coming to the Hill, I worked for 21 years along with former chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee at Royce. Just prior to him leaving, as you know, as was mentioned, Congressman Ted Yoho has really championed on the BUILD Act and many others, of which I hope that I can take that torch and continue the work that he's done along with Congressman Smith in those regards. DFC, for example, is one of the legislation that I'm really hoping that we can utilize more public-private partnership in making sure that our foreign assistance actually is being effectively used, and make sure that every dollar that we give in the foreign assistance is stretched wide and far and everywhere that we can take it to. I worked on several issues that was already mentioned with, for example, Congressman Joaquin Castro on introducing the Fostering Innovation on Global Development Act. That is to scale up the innovative methodologies and technologies at USAID to increase the effectiveness of foreign assistance. And I regularly speak with the USAID administrators, Samantha Powers, on these type of issues. And I've been very, very outspoken, and I've spoken on the need to incorporate public-private development initiatives to encourage more investment and reduce dependence on the U.S. foreign assistance. And I know to that end, this caucus, and I'm really glad to see many of you already participating, will bring innovative ideas to the table and make sure that you come and visit my office. And I also want to introduce my staff that work on these issues. Sebastian Wiggly standing in the back. Just get to know him and the face, and putting the name with the face is always helpful. So we are open to your innovative ideas and about how we can make these aid programs more effective and make sure that our tax dollars are effectively used and therefore save those tax dollars. So again, don't want to elaborate too much on what my co-chair, Congressman Adam Smith, has done. He's been champion on this issue for many more years. I look forward to working with all of you, with Congressman Smith on this issue and many more. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you for your advocacy. Thanks.
If the ambassador is inclined, we could still open it up for more Q&A, a little more discussion. We have a little more time. Questions from the audience. We do not have the
Speaker, we do not have the capability, unfortunately, to take questions from those who are online. So we can just open it up for folks in the audience. And it looks like Mr. Ingram has a question.
Okay, George, please.
I want to know, ask Ambassador Green, if he's willing to commit here and now to lessen my bipartisan effort to have Tessie be the next administrator.
And the reason I wouldn't is she seems like a nice person.
Serious.
Good, thank you.
There was early discussion about the opportunity to AID to collaborate with other agencies, particularly the DFC. But what about other donors? AID has, the US AID has the reputation of, we do it our way, we don't collaborate with others, the Brits and others buy into our programs. Wouldn't it be a better return on our dollar if another donor has a successful program for us to just buy into it so it could be scaled up, or in other ways partner? And if you agree with the premise, and my assumption is you do, how do we make that happen?
Well, so first off, I want to pick up on something you heard earlier, which is really one of the most important things we can do and probably won't. The way that we do foreign assistance is a mess. It's 22 different departments, agencies, bureaus, all over the place. They have conflicting rules, conflicting branding, conflicting staffing patterns. Makes no sense at all. And it happened organically. It's just that's the mission creep, if you will. The first thing that I think we need to do is coordinate our own foreign assistance. My argument has been that the administrator should be dual-hatted, and have the ability to sort of step back and look over the whole panoply and make sure that we better coordinate and align the work that we're doing, because we don't. And I was ambassador in Tanzania, and quite frankly was shocked at some of the things that we were bumping into each other on. I had one agency come and it had an entirely different salary scale to USAID, and they were hiring away USAID. Went really well with my USAID lead in Dar es Salaam. It was all messed up. We don't do a very good job of aligning these things administratively. And I think that that's the first thing we need to do, so that there's a single access point. That would be very, very helpful. And Henrietta Fore had that role at one time. I was with Henrietta yesterday. I would argue that you should even elevate it above what Henrietta had in terms of the position, but it's not partisan at all. We should do it, and we should do it fast, because we're really not hitting on all cylinders in terms of that coordination. So that's one thing. Secondly, let's not forget that in some cases we are different than other agencies for good reason. So we don't do budget support, a couple of exceptions, but we don't do budget support around the world. In some cases, I wouldn't be caught dead doing budget support. I remember Hillary Clinton saying that very, very point. No way in the world are we going to take precious taxpayer dollars and put them into the treasury of a couple of countries where we are skeptical about how they would be used. So yes, there are ways of doing it, but we should also recognize the differences. As you know, I feel very strongly, George, about this notion of incentivizing capacity building to work ourselves out of business, but more significantly, the sliding scale, so that we can change our relationship in more effective ways. One of the last trips I took overseas, I went to Albania, and Eddie Rama, I remember Eddie in a group setting. When you're administrator, you always get introduced the same way. This is the money guy. Not exactly the introduction you're looking for, but that's the way it works. And in a setting, he said something that I thought was really interesting. He said, love the programs you guys have done. You're doing some ecotourism programs, love it. We don't need them anymore. What we need is, you forget, countries that have come from a more Soviet background. They have no experience in governing transparently, citizen responsive. It's not that they don't want to, they don't know how to. And so he said, that's what I need. I need you to help to build that capacity in our young people as young people enter public service. And I thought, boy, he's right. We overlook the obvious sometimes. So it's got to be aligned country by country. So that's another piece that I would say to it. But I remember at the 50th anniversary of the DAC, when I gave because I was asked to, my vision for the journey to self-reliance. And it was a fascinating thing, because some of my European counterparts said, well, we don't really believe that anybody's self-reliant. And the Koreans said, actually, we are. and there were stories after stories of countries that had, in fact, made that journey. And so a lot of our counterparts, some do great programs that we should borrow from the best, but a lot of them have a different vision for what assistance should be. Also, finally, it's really important to use the role of the ambassador, chief of mission in country, because the chief of mission in many countries has the ability to align assistance programs in very practical ways. The number of times when, so for those of you who are here on the Hill, the greatest experience that I had, privilege of my entire career, I helped to write PEPFAR and MCC, and then I got to administer them. The largest compact in the world in Tanzania, one of the largest PEPFAR. That was just a blast, right? You don't get that good fortune very often. And I was surprised at how little understanding there was in the field sometimes of our programs. again, early days of those programs. But there were a number of times when I had restrictions on my money. For whatever reason, Congress never puts restrictions on funding, so it couldn't have been from Congress. But I would have these restrictions, and I would have a partner diplomatic mission, someone that we were aligned with, and I would call the ambassador, him or her, and say, you know what, I can't do this, but if you do that, I'll do that, and we'll figure out a way to advance interests. So there's more flexibility than you think there. Also, some countries don't work with the private sector like we do. We went through some painful fights about the role of the private sector, and I'm one of those who believes in the role of the private sector, but that was a bumpy road at times in the past. Other donors haven't actually resolved that yet. So should we be doing more in part? Absolutely. But sometimes there are reasons. And then the other piece to it is, and I do feel strongly about this, we need some other countries to step up. On the humanitarian assistance front, USAID does more than anyone in the world by a long shot, and at a time when the world is on fire and there are humanitarian needs elsewhere. Quite frankly, we need some of our allies to step up, because we cannot carry this, I won't say alone, that's not fair, but this is a huge challenge for us. And I think one of the greatest challenges to USAID, and Samantha and I have talked about this, and she agrees, if we're not careful, the overwhelming humanitarian needs are going to begin to cannibalize the things that we know we should do and want to do in terms of long-term development investment. So we need other countries also to do a lot more. It would be very helpful to some of the things that we want to do. But that, to me, is a significant challenge right now. Again, 110 million displaced people. That's just as of the last report. Numbers are going to go up. Nobody does nearly as much as the U.S. And as I recall, last time I saw the numbers, we're number 1, and 2, 3, and 4 added together don't get there. And so we really need to be doing a lot. We also need allies to be doing a lot at this very important moment in history.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, can we take one more question? Okay, so one more question there in the back. Yes, please.
Sure, you mentioned earlier how you've seen the change in technology over time. What could or should meaningful investment in effective data and technology look like? When we talk about better results matching.
Yeah. Well, so sometimes I think we have to be careful in how we use terms. So first off, it's not outputs that we should measure, in my opinion, outcomes, right? What is the goal that we're trying to achieve? Oftentimes, it's measuring capacity, and in global health, there are lots of examples of that. So I think that's an important thing to do. But also, particularly in our governance programs, democracy and governance, and that's what I used to do. I'm a big believer in those investments. How we measure that, I think, is something to be careful of. So we can measure widgets. We can measure whether there's an election and whether they have an election commission. But all of us know that an election does not a democracy make. It's what happens between elections that's key. And so I think some of the areas that are high priorities for all of us, they're hard to measure the outcomes because they're longer term. And then, on those things that we can measure, app technology, frugal technology makes it possible in ways that, again, to me are mind-blowing. When I look at what young groups in places like Kenya are doing and watching expenditures on the construction of a building, that's pretty cool. And they see if things go astray, and they're not quiet about it, nor should they be. So there are all kinds of opportunities that are there. To me, the use of technology, so much of it's we need to do a better job. I'm a big believer in the grand challenge model. Need to do more of it. We need to incentivize particularly young people in the use of innovative app technology and so much more. I mean, I'm sure you guys all know the story of Zipline and the drone delivery of blood in Rwanda. Those are cool stories. And there's so much more of that. I'll leave you with this. So why am I optimistic? Because all of you are here. The number of people who are engaged and interested and thinking about ways to harness technology, the young people that I see all the time who want to find ways to be involved, that's fantastic. That's the reason to be optimistic in all this. They'll come up with things that I could never have dreamed of, and that's great. And now, with some of the tools that are in the hands of young people in Africa and Asia and in the Americas, in areas that have been isolated and cut off, we to see the ideas we get from them. Those innovations are really cool.
Mark, thank you very much. You've given us a huge amount of food for thought. There is a lot that has been accomplished and so much more than we can do. So please join me in
Thank you, Ambassador Green. Thank you, Tessie. Excellent, excellent presentation. And like Tessie said, tremendous food for thought. And you always are an incredibly thoughtful member, ambassador. So grateful to have you here. We're going to wrap it up, but I want to particularly thank a few staff that have made this possible, particularly Connor Stubbs with Congressman Smith back in the corner here. Sebastian, who was here earlier with Congresswoman Kim, and then on my team, Karen Swatson and Julia Lancey here in person. Yes, thank you all very much. Connor, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you like to say any kind of?
I'll just say very quickly, thank you all for coming. For keeping updated on what the caucus is doing, and people will be lots over the next 6 months to a year. Please feel free to email me. If you have ideas, we're also welcome to take them. I have a long list that we will never be able to get to, but I'm always happy to take more interesting ideas, concepts, holding roundtables, holding briefings. A lot of it will be staff level as well. So if there's an issue that you want to come talk to, 10, 15, 20 foreign affairs staffers on the Hill about, come talk to me and we can try to organize something for you. It doesn't have to be a big panel discussion that's live streamed. It can be simple as well. So looking forward to talking and working with all of you, and it's good to see some other faces.
Thank you again for coming.